Lisa M. Hunsberger. What is the M for?
Monique.
I like that. That's cute. Lisa Monique. Did you ever get called Monique when you were a kid?
Well, only my aunt calls me Monique, and that's because she was the one who gave me that name. My mother had a different name in mind for my middle name, which was Marie. But then when one of my aunts came to the hospital when I was born, she was like, oh no, you have to name her Monique. You have to name her Monique. So I became Lisa Monique instead of Lisa Marie.
Okay. I'm already being pinged on Messenger about, hey, you're not letting us into the room. I wanted to tell her first, welcome to OTJtv number 30, 30, big 30.
Hey.
And our guest today is Lisa M. Hunsberger. I always screw something up in the introduction. And I wanted to try a few things. And interestingly enough, there's a bunch of people that want to come in here and greet you, Lisa. So I'm going to let them in right now.
Sounds good.
Here they come. This should be fun. Oh, and Linda's here, so I'm gonna let her in too. And listen, thanks very much for coming. I think this is a really good, timely point to hear what you have to say. A lot of people have just finished their classes and are looking to sort of, reflect on what they need to do to improve things, and are now looking at the next set of classes, whatever they might be, if it's going to be hybrid or going to be face-to-face, and whatever that might be. I think the stuff that is going to be really, really useful. So I'm really looking forward to today.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to sharing. I can see Rhea. Hi, Rhea. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, both on Zoom and even on Facebook as well. And I know my mom's watching too, so I have to always give a shout out to my family, because they are my rock.
Okay.
Truly.
Oh, and I don't know if Lisa's going to, but hi, Mom. What was I going to say? Okay, so tell us, how did you get so good at this? When did you start doing PowerPoint and Keynote and all of the, how did you accrue your information about all of this?
So I started like literally everybody else, which is having to do a presentation for a research paper that I was working on. And well, I shouldn't say everybody else, but most persons tend to start with presentation software when they have to give a presentation, have to deliver a presentation. And it's always that thing of, how do I turn my paper at that time I was in grad school, how do I turn my paper into a presentation? And I did what everybody else did. You just copy and paste chunks of the paper onto the slides, which looking back, I'm like, oh my God, like poor audience, but now, I know how to make it better, but that's where I started. And I used to hate giving presentations because I'm standing in front of the audience. I'm nervous as heck. And I started doing public speaking from a very young age at my parents' church. I started speaking in front of audiences of like 500 people or more. So I was accustomed to being in front of an audience. But there's always something different about when you're just, in a play and you're playing a character or you're delivering announcements versus when you are presenting your own work that you have been working on to persons who are experts in this field, and now they have to listen to you and they're gonna ask you questions at the end. The Q&A was always the worst part. And when I had to give a presentation, I had some technical difficulties, let's just say, that were entirely my fault. And when we were doing the prep for this major conference presentation, my fellow grad students were really upset because I basically caused I switched laptops, I caused the projector to go down. And this is back in the early 2000s. So we're talking those clunky projectors, Jose, the ones that take forever to start up. And therefore, if it goes down, hunting down the IT guy who is halfway across the campus, they were livid. So when feedback time came, because it was prep.
Mm-hmm.
When feedback time came, they didn't hold back. All of the nice social graces that they afforded everyone else before me. Oh, honey, that was all the window when it was my turn. But after I went home, I held in the tears. I went home and I cried. So yeah, I cried a lot, let's just say. And when I collected myself, I realized that they really had given me a lot more critique, like good feedback, because they were so unrestrained. in their feedback. The feedback they gave me was, I don't understand this. This doesn't make any sense. That I can't follow what you're saying. So I had to completely rethink the way that I was presenting this information, because if the people I'm presenting to couldn't understand it, then what's the point? And in so doing, I decided to get a little creative and do something I never really saw anyone else doing before. And I started, which was using animation basically to drive home my point. And that was really where the idea of kind of a more creative approach to presentation design began.
When did you get that moment of enlightenment that, like, I've got to step up my game. I've got to really pick this up. What year was that? Was that well before the pandemic, or was that?
This was well before. This was 2007, I believe. I think this was when I was doing Society for Caribbean Linguistics conference in Dominica in the Caribbean. So I think it was 2006, 2007.
What software were you using then?
I was using PowerPoint.
Okay, because I know that you're a bit of a Keynote user now. When did that switch happen?
That happened when I came to Japan. And when I got to Japan was actually when the more creative things kind of came out. And that's because I was teaching senior high school. These were kids who did not like English, did not want to learn English. And I wanted to make things more interesting. So when the JTEs would invite me into the classroom to speak about a topic, I'm like, these poor kids are going to have to sit down for like the next 15 minutes and listen to me droning on in English. How boring. So I made presentations that were an accompaniment to my my talk then. So they weren't just listening to me speak in simple English, but they're looking at the graphics that were corresponding to what I was saying. And shortly after I started doing that, that was when I made a switch to Keynote, because there is a very particular feature that I love to use that was a little bit more cumbersome for me in PowerPoint. They now have it, but at the time they did not. And in Keynote, it's called Magic Move.
Good. Before we get onto that, the good stuff, but everything you say is good stuff. I wanted to do a little bit of housekeeping for everybody who's watching us, and you got a really nice audience here. I don't think I've ever had this many people. Well, or at least I've had this many people. I had something like this with Curtis's talk and with other ones, but you're right up there. Okay, so for all the people who are watching us, first, the people who are watching us on the live stream in Facebook, I will be keeping my eye on the comments. So if you have anything that you want to send me this, get me to send up to Lisa while she's doing a presentation, just write them in there and I'll bring them up. For the people who are in the audience itself of the Zoom room, welcome. We're going to try something else because just trying to get things a little bit more organized, and I'm like the rest of you, I learn as I go. And one thing that we wanted to try was to actually keep the conversation between me and Lisa for a little while. And after she gets through her main points, then we'll ask for open mic comments from the audience. In the meantime, if there is something that you want to ask, please feel free to use the chat. Please feel free to use the raise hand button. And if the raise hands go up and I see that there's something there, maybe we can have you unmute and ask your questions to Lisa. Otherwise, let's go on with the conversation. Let's see. So the magic move thing, I think, if it's okay with you, we'll get onto that just a little bit later. There were a couple of other things that I wanted to ask at first. If you were affected by the pandemic enough as a teacher, and then you realize, wow, everybody's a step ahead of me, and they're doing all kinds of stuff that's really, really cool with PowerPoint and with Keynote, but you've never done anything like this before, where can people sort of start? I mean, let's assume they have a computer, obviously, because they've saw what you were doing in a presentation or something. But what do you recommend that they do to actually get themselves off, just have chalk and talk lectures and start doing presentations?
Well, the thing that I like about presentation software is that for me, it takes away, there's a lot of, let me preface with this, there is a lot of prep that goes into using presentation software. So let's get that out right now, right? There really is, truly. But what it does is that it cuts down on a lot of the time that you would spend explaining something in the classroom, because you have this thing on the screen that's demonstrating what you're talking about. And for me, that word is key, demonstrating. Think about what you want to explain to your students. Is there something that could get the idea to them faster than you just saying it, or you just translating to their language? So instead of translating to Japanese, instead of saying usagi, can you show them a photograph of a rabbit and just say rabbit, for instance? That's where I started with my senior high school students. I didn't just want to have me speaking in English and the JTE translating everything to Japanese. I wanted for me to be speaking in Japanese and for them to be listening and understanding based on what I'm demonstrating to them. So think about what you want to show your students and think about whether or not there is an image, a picture, a photograph, a screenshot that can get this idea across faster. Is there a video that you can show them on a slide that can get this idea across faster? Is there a sound that can get this idea across faster? So I remember when I did JALT Technology and Teaching 2019, and I did a workshop on ideas for the classroom. One of the audience members, I almost said participants as if I were in a webinar. One of the audience members shared that she was teaching her students about bells, and that there are different bells. There are church bells, school bells, and all these different sounds, and especially in her country. And so she would play the sounds of these bells. And there was a JET. I came to Japan on the JET program, Japan Exchange and Teaching Program, and there was one participant on the JET program who, when she was doing her self-introduction to the students, she's from Australia. And as we all know, Australia has a lot of very different animals from what a lot of us have in other countries. And so she used the animal cries. Was it? No. I'm so sorry. I don't think it was Australia. I think she was Canadian. I think she's from Canada.
Linda Cadota says, I think that was me at JALT Call 2017.
It could have, I did do a presentation at JALT Call, but it was not 2017, it was 2019. But okay. It could have been you at JALT 2020. Then it could have been you. Could have been you who came to the 2019 Technology and Teaching. Yeah. Small world. Look at that. Did you realize it was Linda?
Everybody comes to OTJ, and everybody came to watch you. Anyway, go on with the Australian animals.
Sorry, I just remembered it wasn't Australian. It was actually it was a Canadian. And so Canada has, and of course, Jose, you're Canadian. So you have moose, which I don't have in Jamaica. You have moose, you have
ice hockey players. We have ice hockey players. That's
what we're talking about. Animal, yeah. I didn't know about that part, but
oh, no, those guys are animals. Oh my God.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah.
But I remembered her presentation. Her presentation stood out to me over the years because it was such a creative use of sound. I never used sound in my presentation until I saw her presentation. And that's the thing. When your audience, and by audience, whether it's your students, whether it's your peers at a conference, whether it's your coworkers, if your audience can leave with this takeaway, there's something in your presentation that helped them to remember the contents that can really make a big impact, a big impression, and you will have achieved your goal of partaking knowledge, of helping in the partaking of knowledge, of imparting knowledge then to your audience members, to your students. And so as I said, when it comes to where do you start with thinking about presentation, I always say, think about how you can make the biggest impact. And a lot of us use a lot of text on our slides. And in some ways we can't get away from it, because if you're giving homework, there's no other way to give homework than to literally have just a slide with the homework assignments on it. But if you're giving a talk to your students, if you're talking about a lesson and you're explaining a particular topic, is there an image that you can use? Is there a sound that you can use, or other things that you can use to make it more impactful, to make the meaning more easily understood by your students?
Did you find yourself changing in your own teaching, maybe even as deeply as your own teaching philosophy, much less your teaching style, as you actually sort of became a little bit more in conjunction with this projector beside you? Did you find that you spoke less, that you spoke more clearly, or there was less speaking for you to do because you had these slides all prepped up and ready to go? Did you find your teaching change?
It did. It did. So the first thing was I could think more clearly from my students' perspective. And I always say that I always make audience-centered presentations. And I always tout that we need to start making more audience-centered. And what I mean by that is when we want to make a presentation, and regardless of to whom, right? Regardless of the audience, whether it's our students or anyone else, we often think of it from the perspective of what do I want to say? What do I want to explain? And not so much from the perspective of, will this help them better understand what I have to say? And my teaching style changed in the sense that I was able to think like my students. I was able to think of the scaffolding that I'll need to do, because if I'm talking about this topic, do they have the grammar? Did they learn all of the grammar that I'm about to use for this topic? If they didn't, then I can't use the present perfect. I have to use present tense only. How can I make this grammatical in English using only present tense then? Also, yes, speaking less. So I didn't have to say as much. I didn't have to use Japanese in the classroom as much because they can see what I'm talking about, not just me talking at them. I call it throwing English at them. I was just saying things, saying, simple sentences, using what I knew that they could understand, but do it in a way that would that was more impactful then, make a bigger impact on their understanding.
In this, so you were an ALT then when you learned a lot of these skills. Did you find any hesitancy from your school or from your JTE when it came to the classroom? Oh my God, okay, this is gonna be a good story. You're already laughing.
No, because I had a unique, Jose, I had a unique situation.
Alrighty.
So when I came to Japan, I came here having already taught English. I taught English in France. I taught English and linguistics I taught English and linguistics at 2 universities in my home country. So I had a lot of experience. And then I was placed at more of a low academic school, and it was kind of a blow to the ego at the time, because I'm like, I have so much to offer. If I could have been at a higher academic school, I could be teaching these students how to use all of these wonderful things. I can break down grammar so easily, like complicated stuff. Okay. But this school was actually an atypical Japanese senior high school. No uniform. They had like 3 shifts, a morning, afternoon, evening shift. And it was a lot more relaxed. So students made their own timetables. They came when they had classes and left when they didn't. So very much university style, but high school. And because they were so much more free, and because they had all of this technology at the school, they had a teleconferencing room with, they never used it. And I unfortunately didn't get the opportunity to use it with them. But I was able to have, like, I taught my students how to make presentations as well then. So like they were very open to the use of technology. So the second that I found out that I could use technology in the classroom, I started doing that. And I've since learned from Colette, who I believe has joined us on this Zoom chat. Oh no, she was on. Oh yeah, she is, yeah. Hey Colette, we're going to be submitting a proposal for JALT, but Colette teaches at elementary, and I learned from her that now all the elementary school students have tablets, Jose?
It depends. There's this thing called a Giga project, which is really at its apex right now through the country, but some have actually finished their 5-year stint through the Giga project. Some are just starting up. Most are at the middle of it, but yeah, lots of tablets, lots of Chromebooks in schools now. I don't know about lots of implementation and lots of knowledge, but certainly the government is talking about a lot of this hardware that's in schools.
Yeah. I was really surprised because when I came on the JET program, there was a lot more hesitancy, to put it mildly, to use technology in the classroom. But then hearing from Colette, who she uses technology, she uses her tablets with her kids a lot. Like, I was really surprised. But I was lucky back almost 10 years ago. This summer makes 10 years to have started off at a school.
It's an interesting expression on your face. It looks, I wouldn't quite call it regret, but okay.
No, I was thinking of my my survival Japanese language ability. I call it my knowledge of survival Japanese after 10 years. But let's pretend to not pay much attention to that. But yes, but I was in a unique situation, and that's really why I was able to have what I did.
Anything you might want to give as senpai's advice to the ALTs that don't have quite that hardware capability in their schools, and some of their students aren't even allowed to bring their phones into their classrooms with them? They have to leave them in a locker. But basically, what if or what if somebody doesn't have the luxury that you did?
So in my case, so I didn't use technology in all of my classes. I just was able to use it in a few of my classes. So it wasn't of the 100% of the time that I'd be teaching, I would say maybe 10 to 15% of that time would be with technology. So the remaining 85% was literally just being creative with handouts. And also my school had a colored printer, which is apparently also more on the rare side, at least it was back then. But I couldn't print anything in color to give to the students. So what I used to do was I'd print something print it and laminate it. And then I'll cut, I'd make like a table with images that would correspond to a lesson that I'd be doing. And I'd cut it out then. And so the students could use this material again and again. And I would still have that kind of interactivity that I was looking for, that I was able to get with using presentation software or with incorporating presentation software into a lesson, into a part of a lesson then. And I was able to get that same effect, but by actually printing something out and giving to the students.
Just getting into the nitty gritty now, and I want to remind everyone that while I still want to give Lisa the maximum amount of time to focus on what she wants to say, please feel free to raise your hands, or if there's a question that you want to ask. I see Linda and Glenn are already commenting in the chat, and to the people in Facebook, please use the comment field to drop in your questions, and I'll get them up to Lisa as quickly as we can. Going from basically a lecture style classroom to maybe handouts, and now you're thinking, wow, Lisa's inspired me to take my stuff and put it into PowerPoint. So you got a whole bunch of text-based lectures. You're one of these people that kind of started using PowerPoint or Google Slides, and a lot of it is text-based. Where do you go from there? Where do you start moving towards making something as attractive as the stuff that I've seen you present? And I hope you have a couple of things that you want to show us later, but where do you go from there? Where's the next step to actually get up to your level?
I mean, frankly, starting. And I must say, I didn't start here. Like I said, I started like everybody else, copying and pasting a flood of text onto slides and just making it bullet point. That's where I started, frankly speaking. Right. So when it comes to perfection, for me, perfection is relative to where you are. And I always say to strive for achievable perfection. What can I realistically achieve with the skill set that I currently have? And I would say take the tips that I'll share and use those tips as best as you can, and just continue working on it, because you get better with experience. Okay. And when it comes to for me, I tend to prefer to do slide design as opposed to presentation delivery, because slide design has to do with how attractive the slides look. presentation delivery incorporates not just the presentation, but also the public speaking aspect of delivering a presentation. And so when it comes to designing a slide to making your slide look attractive, I would say minimalism is the key.
Minimalism.
So not packing a whole lot onto the slide, using keywords. So when I teach when I used to teach my students how to create a presentation, I used to always tell them, they were not allowed to put any sentences on their slides, keywords only. Use an image and a keyword. And if you're going to do bullet points, it has to be just the keywords, because there is this kind of an ebook effect. If your audience is coming to your presentation, or your students is coming to your presentation, and you're reading these sentences off the slides, they're reading it and they're listening to you at the same time. So there are two bits of input happening with your audience. They're reading it and they're hearing you saying it at the same time. But if you just have the keywords on the slides, then your audience is able to see the keyword and then refocus their attention on you. So that's, I think, one of the main things.
I gotta say, some of the people who I sort of, when I go to a keynote presentation, it's not Daniel, it's not Curtis, but when I see presentations and I'm thinking, oh wow, I've been wanting to go see the speaker for a long time. I've heard of this person, and I'm sitting down and I practically got a bucket of virtual popcorn next to me, waiting to watch this, and it's this person basically just reading their slides. It's just like my gut drops, and I go, oh no, they're that kind of presenter. So yeah, the whole thing about reading your slides, I probably am a little bit guilty of putting too much text on my slides, but I definitely try to avoid saying exactly what is on the slide, or even I'm not even going to use those words. They can already read, but they're probably there to see me more than they are my slides. And I try not to. I definitely don't want to read my slides, but there are still a lot of people that do that. Do you have some sample? Oh, no, go.
Sorry, I was just going to say one thing that you can do, because let's say you have a quote from someone that it's very important that your students know this quote, or that they have a very specific bit of information, and you absolutely need to show them these words. Then it does help to read it with your audience, but this should be the one-off slide, not every slide, but like the one-off slide, where you actually have a big block of text and then you read it with the audience, and then you go on to explain it to them. Like, that is absolutely, I don't knock doing that, but for me, that has to be, like I said, the one-off, the exception, the one slide out of 20 that you would do that.
We're already getting, I think people are starting to get a little bit excited to actually see some of your slides, if you have a few that you wanted to show us. So do consider that. So text, keep it minimal. Mm-hmm. And would you say, what's the ratio, the balance between the slides that you have that don't incorporate any text, or incorporate text plus something else within it, as opposed to the number of slides that you have that just, for whatever reason, if it's necessity or whatever else, that are just text? Or is there a number, a ratio that you keep in your head, like, oh, this has way too much text, I'm going to have to re-edit this? Or is that something you think about at all?
Basically, if it's something that, if it's a block of text that I don't need to have as is, I always minimize. And that's basically that's my one rule. If this is not a quote or something that needs to be as it is, I always use just the keywords, and I'll use images to bring out what I want to say instead.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why don't we get started? And just before we or start opening up the audience's mics and stuff, and start making this a bit of a free for all. Good luck, Lisa. This is OTJtv. We're animals on our own here too. And why don't you show us a little bit of what you might have prepared to show, and then that'll give people an idea of what they might have been thinking, and give them a chance to sort of percolate some questions for you. You got anything for us there?
I do. I do want to see what some of the questions or comments have been in the chat here
I,
on
I
Zoom.
Mostly it's people going, show us the slides. So I think that's the first thing that they want to see, because I think what we have in the audience are a lot of people like me who probably do know how to, like, duplicate a slide, move a slide from one point to another. Maybe some people who know how to use master slides. But in terms of getting a real professional's look on how to improve them, I think a lot of people are probably eager to see something like that. So that maybe that's what you've got as an audience here.
All right, so let me give you this. I'm going to share my screen so that you can see a few of my slides.
And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, while Lisa's doing that, give a chance to everyone to, if you want to, unmute yourselves. Please use it judiciously. And if I mute you again, please don't take offense at it. It's only because I want to keep the audio's focus on Lisa. But now you're up. If you want to ask a question by voice, please do so. I still encourage you to raise your hands, because we got a bunch of people sort of piling on. That still does make things difficult, but at least now you can, if you have something really quick to say. Okay, Lisa, you're up.
All right, so.
Or maybe not.
I got a notification that it failed to start, but here we go. All right, so here's one main thing. So making use of space. So sometimes when we use a template as is, the template just has the words top left. And I'll see this happen a lot with presenters, where the template has us typing literally one sentence, but the slide itself is so big that we can actually center the words, bring the words down into the center, and it will be a lot more attractive when we have only text on our slides. So let's take a look at this slide that I have right here. This slide is made up of three main things. We have an image that's on the back of the slide. Then we have a shape, a rectangle right here. That's a black rectangle that I have on top of it. And then I have the word design on top of that. And it's very simple, very minimalistic, but it's very attractive and nice to look at that. And shapes, I always try to encourage persons to use more shapes in their presentations, because shapes are really very underutilized, I feel. We can use shapes, for example, if I wanted to point to something. I mean, if I'm on Zoom, it's very easy. I can use my cursor and say, okay, there's a straw in this. Is that a mug? It looks like a mug. There's a straw in the mug, or there's a mouse on the table, on the desk. There's a computer. But if you're presenting in a room, you may not have the option of showing your cursor, your mouse, your cursor. Your pointer, sorry. Instead, you would have to have either the laser pointer, or if you have an arrow that you have on the screen, you can use the arrow to point something out on the screen, kind of like what I did here. Right? I use the arrows to show that you can fill up all of the space, and I used a rectangle that doesn't have anything on the inside, so it's not filled in. It just has the lines on the outside to demonstrate exactly what I mean. Mm-hmm. Now, here is a slide that has a lot of text. So next, think about how you'll represent your ideas visually on your slides. Avoid large bodies of text at all costs when you're speaking your audience. So if I'm saying exactly this, and this is not crucial, I literally can just use this instead. Avoid large bodies of text. Try to highlight the most important points and give your audience time to read and process what you're saying. And finally, avoid adding any superfluous information. So the same exact information, but all I did was I created kind of like a table with lines here. This is my own makeshift table that I created. And I added an image here with text, an image here with text, an image with text, and just text by itself here.
That was probably the coolest slide I've seen in all the time of the pandemic in terms of presentation, with all of that movement and trying to make its point, like bam, point is made, mic drop. This is a really good slide. I also like that design on the side there, you know, like with the contents, very graphic novel sort of style. I like that. How long did it take you to make, or how, this is the other thing, like you're an expert in this, so obviously your mileage may vary, but just in terms of your memory, how long did or would it take you from scratch to make a slide like that? Just this slide.
So this slide alone, the hardest part, honestly, is sourcing the images. That's the part that takes the longest. And I would say that this slide sourcing all, so this is a shape sourcing. Oh, I think I actually created this computer image myself using shapes.
Good. That's one way to source stuff. Just go ahead and make it. Yeah.
Make it yourself. Yeah. But I think I made this a long time ago. So I sourced the highlights and I sourced the magnifying glass. That's maybe 15 minutes. Here's the thing. If you don't know what you're going to do, it's going to take a lot longer. However, if you have an idea as to what you will do, it will minimize your time greatly. And that's why I always say to start with an outline. Think of what you want to say. Don't just open the software and start putting things on the slide as it comes to you. Think about what you want to say first. Think about what images may be good to look for and add to your slides, and then do that. So because I already knew I wanted to use a highlighter to highlight, and I wanted to use a magnifying glass to demonstrate what I mean by read and process, going online and finding those two images, that probably took me about 15 minutes maximum.
I've got a couple of comments in the chat. One of them is from Daniel, and I know that he loves this book. He talked about it at OTJSS 2020, the one Presentation Zen. Sorry. But I don't know, Daniel, if you can think about maybe opening your mic and talking about that. But there was also another a direct question by Mary Virgil Uchida. Mary, I don't know if you want to open up your mic or your camera and maybe ask it directly. I'll give you a chance to think about it. Oh, there she is. Mary, good morning.
Good morning. I've always thought that at the international conferences where the audience has members who may not totally understand what is being said by the speaker who's speaking in very fast, natural English, and that maybe having some Japanese or having their native language, the PowerPoint is actually more of a bilingual tool to help them follow what is being spoken. And that's why it's something I've just thought about for a long time. So have you ever tried doing that?
I actually have not, and mainly because when I present to students, it's usually in English class. And so the goal is really to help them to understand what is being said in English without the need of using Japanese. Mm-hmm. Also, as I mentioned earlier, my survival Japanese language skills are not really up to par. So I wouldn't trust myself, but with some of the translation tools that are out there right now, that may be a possibility, but that's actually a very good idea. That's definitely something that can be done. Yeah.
Curtis seemed enthusiastic with the idea. Mary, you have a follow-up question, but Curtis, if you want to chime in a bit, go ahead.
Mary, no, it's just that we've had Japanese teachers of English who have spoken at our local chapter up here, and wow, we had such a turnout of other teachers, Japanese teachers, who wanted to learn more.
Yes.
And because they were speaking in Japanese, people really came out of the woodwork. We were just so shocked.
Yes.
But if somebody who is speaking only in English might be overwhelming for some Japanese native teachers of English. And so that's why I began to realize we need to help those people improve their techniques as much as possible. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Thanks for
Curtis,
sharing.
did you want to comment quickly before I go to Daniel?
I just thought that was a really good idea. And I even put a little bit of Japanese in my classroom lectures. Like I gave one on the difference between genuine love and falling in love. And I put in a kanji for I and koi.
Koi.
You know, so sometimes for those difficult terms, I would have to explain in Japanese anyways, a little bit of Japanese help. That's a great idea by Mary.
I think the general idea here that makes me think that I agree with Mary and I agree with you and generally everybody about the bilingual aspect of things. We live in, or we deal with EFL, so it's a bilingual situation. But if you really want to put it into a context in your head, I would say just be empathic about it. And if you thought that your Japanese was good enough to go see this really famous Japanese speaker at a JASET conference, and you thought, okay, I think I can try, and then you found out that they were putting up keywords in English while they were doing their Japanese presentation, I think it would really help, and it would make the presentation more attractive. You would feel a bit more welcome, and it would show that the Japanese presenter is thinking about their English audience. And then, of course, in the reverse, that's what exactly would take place, and it would help to create more of those bonds between the Japanese teachers of English and the rest of us here. I think that would be a good motivation right there. Daniel, did you want to say something?
I'm, of course, in agreement with what has been said. And I think it comes back to what Lisa said earlier about the presentation and the slides are for the audience, not for the speaker. So it really comes down to knowing your audience as best you can, and then trying to think about what would be most useful for them. Like, how can I help them? And so if that means adding some Japanese in there, then do it. But if it's not necessary, then don't. And sometimes that means we shouldn't always use the exact same slides from a time where we gave it to a different audience, and now we think, oh, I'll just keep using the same slides and not think about, should I make any adjustments for this particular audience? And if anyone wants to see an example of bilingual slides, Gar Reynolds, if you just look him up on YouTube, watch one of his actual presentations, and he's almost always, it's usually in English, but he knows that there's Japanese speakers there, so he'll have like keywords in both languages. And then just a quick aside on that, for as far as design goes, he says that you should use different sizes though, right? So figure out who is it most for, like which language group is it most for, make that one a little bit bigger, and then make the other one a little bit smaller, like it's a subtitle or something like that. But yeah, I think that's useful. And just going back to you asked before, yeah, big fan of presentations, and especially number 3.
Oh, is that the newest version? The newest edition?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
cool.
One of the great things about this is it combines, see, he did 3 books, Presentations in Design, and Naked Presenter. But by the time he got around to version 3, he kind of incorporated all those things into one book. So you just have one volume to.
Oh, excellent.
It is thick.
It's okay. Good.
Thick,
More
It's
pages.
good.
That's right. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. It's a good thing. It's not a textbook. I'm not 18 years old. I actually want thick books. Okay. Anybody else before we move on to the next little bit for Lisa? Lisa, I was always struck when I first started seeing your slides that like how much motion you put in there. And I think when people think of motion in a slide presentation, at least for me, it's mostly been limited to either just the sort of standard movements, the slide in and slide out movement that you can find in PowerPoint, or maybe a blur in or a cross dissolve, or video. But you use movement really, really well in terms of getting kids to, in a way, the term that comes to mind is follow the bouncing ball, or to get their eyes to move from where they are right now to get them to go to that part of the slide too. When did you pick up on that as something that you wanted to do? Because that's sort of something really signature about the stuff that you do.
That's actually something I never I've never thought about before now. But again, I guess it goes back to when the students at the senior high school were watching these slides that were an accompaniment to what I was saying, so an accompaniment to listening activities, and it was, how can I make the slides follow what I'm saying, kind of like a story. So I remember once I had to give a talk on Antarctica. And in order to explain Antarctica to my students, I had to dial it back. Do they know about the continents then? Do they know about the animals that can be found in Antarctica? Are both polar bears and penguins in Antarctica? No, polar bears are in the Arctic, only penguins in Antarctica. So thinking of different ways to introduce it to them. And if I'm going to introduce polar bears and penguins as creatures that can be found Arctic or Antarctic, then maybe I can show that the Arctic is at the top. So have the polar bears move to the top of a globe to show that that's where the Arctic is, and have the penguins move down to the bottom of the globe to show that's where Antarctica is. So I guess that's kind of where that came from. And I remember, by the way, that there were some questions about how to make presentations more engaging for students.
Yeah.
So that was one of the things so first off, engagement will differ. What our idea of engagement is will always differ from person to person. For me, engagement on Zoom is what is happening in the Zoom chat right now. There are persons who are commenting, adding questions, and giving us feedback. Then that's for me is engagement. When I'm presenting to students on Zoom, I like it when or even just having lessons on Zoom, I like when my students are talking to me in the chat. So I'll ask them questions. And that is always one of the great ways to do it. So like with the lesson on Antarctica and showing all the movement, it was, what animal is this? Penguin. Good. In English, we say penguin. Please repeat. Penguin. Penguin. Good. And are there penguins in Antarctica? And so they have to give me that feedback. If it's on Zoom, then maybe they type yes or no, or I use a poll. I tend to like when, I really like when there is chat happening in the Zoom window. That's my thing.
Yeah.
I like when
your eyes are moving down. You're like my kids who are trying to pretend that they're not reading their notes while they're doing their presentations. Because I'm not reading the chat.
I want them to type in the chat.
Just a quickie. I'm sorry if this is like totally off topic, but you were talking about penguins and kids who mispronounce penguins because, it's not their fault. That's the way it is in the language. I don't know if you've seen a really famous sort of viral video of Benedict Cumberbatch on the Graham Norton show. And it's really famous because like this is Benedict Cumberbatch, a guy with like one of the most sort of unique voices in media today. And they got him to do a documentary on penguins. And he just naturally cannot say penguin.
Oh,
he says penguin. And you look it up, Benedict Cumberbatch,
I will Norton, for sure.
and he actually did it through the documentary. You can listen to the documentary, and he doesn't say penguin; he says penguin. So if he was in your classroom, I think you'd have to send him through a few rounds of choral repeats before he can actually get penguin, because Graham Norton couldn't do it either. Oh yeah, Adam, sorry, yeah. Well, actually, I don't know who won first. A quick comment from Susan Jones. I don't know if this is just like, she's just getting this off her chest, but maybe you can help, Lisa, in the Facebook comments. And I'll try to read it out here. My problem is that I teach translation. And first I'm going to read her thing. My problem is that I teach translation, an inherently text-based topic. I struggle to find applicable images or other media to make it interesting. I hate my slides. So I feel bad for you, Susan. Do you need a hug? I don't know if I can give you one right here, but in a situation like that, Lisa, that sounds like, I'm thinking to myself, well, there are just some subjects like maybe math, maybe if you're doing physics and you've got to use these large formulas that maybe you have to make sure that that's, a squared or a cubed, and you have to use text-based stuff or formula-based stuff. But in such a case, is there something that you can recommend, maybe with motion or something, to make those very text-heavy slides a bit more attractive or useful?
Yes, I'm actually seeing if I can find, so I had to teach my students the passive voice. And my students had a very challenging time with understanding the movement that was involved in the passive voice. And so I had to basically break it down to them.
Okay.
I used PowerPoint at the time, no Keynote, to help them understand exactly how they can do that. So the thing with teaching translation, I think, for example, you may want to highlight a particular phrase within a sentence or talk about a particular tense that is going to be examined in the translation. And I'm saying this as someone who does not have a background in translation. One of my aunts is an interpreter. So I do have
She's cringing. She's like rubbing her eyebrows right now listening to you.
Background. So that is there in my family, in my family, but I don't have any experience with this firsthand, aside from trying to translate from my Jamaican language to English and back. But I do think that with shapes, you can absolutely make it a bit more interesting, and also kind of, as I keep saying, making use of the space on a slide. So it's not just one sentence in English and let's say a sentence in Japanese directly underneath it, and you're looking at that, but kind of making things more centered and more interesting. And I'm going to show you what I did with my students.
Yes, please.
The passive voice.
Love that. While she's doing that, I don't want to make this sound like a bait and switch, but this interview is as much about sort of getting people to know that Lisa is like a real up and coming star, at least on this topic, but also to tell you that she's going to be doing other presentations like this, where she does focus more on, okay, now take this button, move this, and then do this button, and do that in her other presentations, which I believe you're going to be doing soon, and a couple of them through the spring, right?
Several, actually. So I have one with you, actually, that's going to be in March, at the start of March. And that workshop is going to be very, far more most detailed that I will ever do, because we'll have the time to dedicate to that. And it's
yes, presentations
and Zoom, which I gotta say that this book, thank you so much, has been helping a whole lot.
Happened again. Way to Zoom bomb me. Okay.
Teaching with Zoom too by a certain.
I did not pay her to do that. I did not arrange with her to do that.
He had
Thank
no
you very
idea.
much.
I keep it handy because, frankly, like, no, I mean, like I have to do things on Zoom, and there was someone who also asked a question about how to teach students how to present better on Zoom, by the way, Jose, that I definitely want to remember to answer, give my feedback on how to, like, a handful of tips.
Okay, good. Okay, enough about the book.
No,
okay.
I have that, and I have a presentation with Boca JALT chapter, and yes. I have another one that I'll be doing in 2 weeks on just an overview, a short overview on ideas for making presentations more.
Okay. Excellent.
Active.
But you do have, I am looking forward to seeing what you have to show. Go for it.
So here is my passive voice slide. And the problem I had with my students was that they couldn't fully understand how to make this sentence passive. So I had a worksheet, and on the worksheet, they had to follow exactly what I did. So I said to them, okay, so circle the subject and underline the object. So by using shapes, I've shown them what subject is, I've shown them what the object is, and I've used color to distinguish the verb from the rest. And then I said, okay, next for the verb, what is the tense of the verb, and write it on the worksheet, right above the word. And then on the worksheet, I had this kind of table set up. And this was literally just so that they could understand how to form the passive voice. It wasn't so much about using it at this point. It was really just understanding how to form it, because they were forgetting certain parts of it, or they weren't using the correct tenses with the verbs and so on. So then using an arrow, I said, okay, so first you're going to move the object to subject position. And then we're going to take the tense of the verb and use that on the be verb. And we're going to use kakoke, so past tense. Next, we're going to take the past participle kakobunshi for the main verb, and it's seen. Don't forget to write the word by, literally by. And we're going to make the subject the object of the passive voice, and that is how we form the passive voice.
How long did that slide take you to make?
This one, so the previous question of how long the previous slide took me to make. So sourcing the images was 15 minutes, but I'd say that slide was maybe 30 minutes at least to do, because I had a lot of little extra bells and whistles. This one would have taken a while because I had to really think about how I was going to explain this to my students. This slide took me, I would say, at least 45 minutes to make that. And that's because this was early out. This was my first time doing something like this. And I had to think a lot about how to explain this to my students. I had to recreate the actual worksheet that I was using with the students on the slides, using all those lines. And that took a bit of time to kind of figure out. So I would say at least 45 minutes. No, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm sorry, I might have stepped on you. 5 minutes, did you say, for that one
45.
45, okay.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Okay, we have a really good question from Alex. I don't know, Alex, if you want to open up your camera or whatever else, but if you can just give me a note in the chat, either yes or no. Do you want to open up your camera or your microphone, either, to ask Lisa directly? But it's a really good question. Okay, so I'll ask Lisa in your stead. So Lisa, here's the question. I'm building and rethinking this for April. How will my instructions work for students with Android or iOS? So basically mobile devices, maybe even small mobile devices. Alex is a university instructor, and she, like me, often gets the kids to get out their phones and say, okay, well, let's play some Quizlet. Okay, let's do this let's do that. So kids who have mobile devices and are allowed to bring them into the classroom, do you think about them when you're doing your presentations? And in the case of just even that one with a lot of movement and stuff, how do you find that translates over to what you originally designed for a larger screen or a larger projector?
Sadly, I would say I tend not to think about that, mainly because I think most of my students who, are we talking about as watching, when students are watching the presentation? Is that the question?
Alex, you can turn on your mic, then please go ahead, and maybe you can follow up on this for yourself. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. The point I was made in the chat is that for university students in Japan from April, these are the first generation of students who have had the experience of everybody having a single device in the classroom. Okay. The cohort that are coming up are all having a device. This has been in place for the last year and a half, but the third year high school students now are in their first year of having a device in the classroom. They're all going to walk into the university with a different device. They are all going to walk in with the expectation that they will be able to do certain things on computer rather than in any way paper-based. Some of them will be in a transition from paper to computers, and they're all going to have something that displays differently. So I think we need to think about the fact that some kids behave, maybe if they're lower income, are not going to have a big screen to look at. They're going to have to, you have to think about your font size. You have to test out, okay, if I watch this on my iMac, how does it look like to a kid on a phone or on an Android, on an iPhone, on an Android, on a Chromebook? You actually have to go through the process of testing this. And I think the OTJ would be a really good place for people to put sample slides up and then get everybody to test, screenshot, this is what it looks like on my device. I think we could have a really nice set of material on there that people can look at immediately. Okay, this is designed, this size font, this size, blah, blah, blah. Okay, people, fire it up on your devices, let's go and screenshot what it actually looks like.
I had an immediate
End
image.
of rant.
I had an immediate image of me showing my slides on OTJ for everyone to critique as equivalent to me just sort of ripping my shirt open and say, okay, go ahead, stab me through the heart.
But the reality is we are going to be stabbed through the heart
no,
in April.
I don't want that.
And you're going to be dealing with kids who are, lots of kids who are making their own TikTok videos and things. They're quite sophisticated users, and they're going to expect the teachers to be operating in a way that is resonant with their function. And their world is often in portrait these days rather than landscape. But anyway, that's something I just want to throw out there for people to think about.
I completely agree. I remember, sorry, Lisa, just but to reinforce Alex's point, when I was first talking about getting yourself up on Zoom, I was telling teachers, listen, you have to remember these kids think they're watching TV. This is a screen, it's a two-dimensional image, and you have to light yourself like you're on TV. You have to frame yourself like you're on TV. You have to present yourself like you're on TV. And people eventually started getting it. But I think Alex's point, I didn't even think about that these kids are the cohort that are themselves not just watching TikTok, they're on TikTok. Now, some of these TikTok videos are kind of amateurish, but that's what you're dealing with. And that's what you have to be ready to address with the techniques that Lisa's showing us. Just a couple of other things here. Oh yeah, Pat Conaway in Facebook was saying that, more of a comment, visual explanations on slides have been really helpful for learning statistics concepts like standard deviation and p-values. So I think he's agreeing with you that those are the sort of things that help you grasp the concept with motion. There's a lot going on in chat, and unfortunately I'm not always able to see everything that's going on there, but I welcome everyone to either use the raised hand buttons, and I think now that we're past 11, first of all, Lisa, want to hang around a bit? I think it's a good audience. People are into what you've got, and if you want to start commenting with an open mic, and certainly there are a lot of people in here. If you want to open up your cameras, let Lisa see your happy faces with the things that she's saying. I not only I but Lisa would welcome it. But Lisa, what other sort of hints or that magic move button? Was that what you were using with that Jacksaw, Lisa?
No, that was actually something else. In the case of Jacksaw, Lisa, I'm trying to remember what it's called in.
By the way, I'm offended that you used a name that began with J and it wasn't Jose.
It's my husband's name.
I'm still offended. Why on earth did you put your husband ahead of me? Go on.
So I use move a lot, and actually that's where, no, I probably should say that very critical to me making certain advancements then in where I am right now with the kinds of movements that I do on my slides. It started with, I wish I could remember her name. There was this absolutely amazing jet in Akita, and she made this Mario PowerPoint game where the students, she had a class and the students, okay, bye Alec.
Bye Alec.
Had to, like she'd ask them questions as like test prep, and Mario would move on the screen based on the prep. And you'd see Mario and you hear the music, or whatever it was. And Mario moving on the screen, you see the baddies coming in, and I'm like, oh, wow, that's really cool. And when I actually, because it was a downloadable presentation, I downloaded it, opened it, and I looked at the slides. She created every single thing on the slide from the background. Like she sourced the background from the video game. She sourced Mario. She sourced even the blocks individually and pasted them on the slide. She sourced the cloud from Mario and put it on the slide. She built it herself. She recreated it was the same scene from the game, but she built every single part individually on her own.
She built it. So wouldn't that still have copyright infringement issues?
That part I
Okay. Yeah.
comment
Okay. Well, all
on,
right. Okay.
but I'm speaking to her I'm speaking to her creativity.
Creativity. Yes. Okay.
Speaking to her creativity, right? And her creativity, that she did this, and the fact that she was able to move these creatures on the slides was something I had never seen before. I'd never seen something so visual, and I'd never seen something with that much movement on it, on a slide. And so, by the way, I don't know about the copyright laws outside of Japan, because I think in the US, some things are allowed for educators. Like there is a how do I put this? There's a measure with which educators are able to use certain things within certain measure, right?
Leeway?
Yeah, certain leeway, but Japan is different, right? So Curtis, right, fair use. Thank you, Daniel. Thank you. And I don't think this was something that this person made in Japan. I think this was something that was probably made beforehand and just used here. So I think that's probably where it started. I can't speak for the person because I do not know this person. There you go. Exactly. Thanks, Curtis. Japan is not fair use, but closed, right? So the creativity on the slides was really what inspired me to start trying to use some of these movements on my own slide. Because up until then, I'd been using images and I'd been using different things, but I'm like, wait, I can have things move on the slide and move in such a creative way. So they're not just going across the screen linearly, but they can do a hula hoop, hoop de hoop on the thing like a roller coaster. What? I can do that? And that's where I started experimenting. And at first, I kind of overdid it. Everything was moving all over the slide, right? But then eventually...
You got Glenn clenching his fist. Glenn Hill is clenching his fists right now.
But then eventually I kind of figured out how to be a lot more reserved, because honestly, less really is more when it comes to making attractive slides. And Alex brought up a very good point about, having a good font size, having something that is big and visual, something that students who are on a very small screen can see very clearly, but students who are also on their computer can also see very clearly.
Just as a quick question, I am now getting I think 4 chats coming at me right now. 2 of them are private and they're everywhere. But people are really interested in what you're saying. Now, I have one person that wants me to ask you this question, but have you ever built slide decks for people, like for money? People said, hey, build my slide deck for me.
I do actually. I have a business called JALT and it's registered here in Japan. And I've done job interview presentations. I've done conference presentations. I've done what's a sales pitch as well. Okay. So I have done that before. Okay. Yes. And
I'll get you in just a second, Daniel, but I wanted to that was the segue to the question I wanted to ask. One person is really impressed with that passive voice slide that you did. Just even that raw, she said, wow, that's amazing. I want to use that in my classrooms. Have you ever done these things, not just to order, but specifically to order for teaching points? So I have a teaching point, Lisa. Can you put together 4 slides for me and then bang that out, take your 2 hours, whatever, and I've done that? Or is that something you think you'd be willing to do?
I would definitely be willing to do that. I mean, okay. my rate, I think, is pretty reasonable. Just over 50 cents an hour.
50 cents
an hour? Yeah, just over.
You work for 50 cents an hour? Okay, I'm gonna have to talk to you, girl. I think I can mentor you in more ways than just
no. Because and I do it like this because it does take time, right? It does take time to create slides. And a lot of the persons that I've been doing this for, they are educators, Jose, right? Not every educator is making bank. Let's get real. So that was really the
Okay, Miss Hunsberger, fess up.
This is me realizing that I said that my rate is 50 cents an hour instead of 50 cents a minute.
Yeah, you did say 50 cents an hour.
Oh my gosh, I cannot believe it.
Yeah, and we were worried about you. Like you were basically being like a horrible boss to yourself.
I was. No, I mean it's just over 50 cents a minute, not an hour. No, I'm not that bad to myself. Oh my God.
Okay. So for all of you who are thinking about actually hiring Lisa to do your slide work for you, and number one, I'll tell you, she is worth it. She is definitely worth 50 cents an hour. And she is still worth 50 cents a minute, but please be forewarned that this is not someone who is going to be doing this for a super cheap wages. This is someone who's got skills, and you're going to have to pay for them. But I'm glad we got that out there. Yeah,
I am glad too, because that is quite the mistake.
It's okay. We love you. We love you. Bye, everybody. Bye.
Bye. Maybe I could have an educated discount. I don't know.
If you had a boss who paid you 50 cents an hour, he would go to jail, Lisa. Be a better boss to yourself. Okay, Daniel, what's your question?
Not a question so much as a quick tip related to what was coming up in the chat earlier about the size of things. Like, so Alex was bringing up the part about how, well, a lot of times your audience may be looking at things on a phone or smaller than the big projected screen. And I just have a quick tip that works actually for both. And that is, one thing I tell my students is, when you design something on your computer and you're sitting right in front of your computer, do not think that that's the experience that the audience has, right? So one quick tip, this is just a really quick, easy tip, is, and right now I'm just thinking about the classroom or the projected screen, is get up, back away from your computer. How far can you go and still make out what it is? And remember that you're designing for the person in the back of the room. So when it comes to phones, it's going to be a similar thing, although it probably has to be even bigger. But the same thing, test out what you've designed, look at it on a phone, and maybe even with a little bit of distance. But anyways, do some tests. I'm talking about the designer. And even if it's the designer's a student, do some tests to see what the experience might be like for someone else who's not sitting right in front of the thing that they're designing. So that's my little quick tip there.
Okay. Yeah. Just to pile on that too. I'm still surprised there are still people thinking, oh, I got a Zoom class tomorrow. Let me do this. Let me hook up this hardware. And they don't test. They don't record and watch themselves. They don't pop out their phone. I mean, everybody has a phone. Go ahead and just log into the Zoom room and do it. And when it comes to Daniel's point about presentations, it is actually easier in a sense to just open up a Zoom room, run your presentation, pull out your phone, have it join the meeting, and then you can immediately see it. There are other sort of test bed methods that you can do native to PowerPoint and Keynote. Opening up a Zoom room is actually easier, and you're killing two birds with one stone. There was a question by Linda. Linda, I don't know if you want to open up your mic and ask it directly about font sizes.
I was just wondering what size is a good font size for people looking on a screen. I tell my students that they can't use anything lower than or smaller than 32 points, but is that big enough on a phone?
I usually say 60 for PowerPoint, to be honest. When it comes to PowerPoint, I say 60 minimum or more, mainly because, as Daniel said, when it's in, the difference between Zoom and in person is that with Zoom, what you see is what your audience sees. Mm-hmm. Because they're looking at a screen, with the exception of on a device where it may be a bit smaller. So you, as Jose rightfully said, and what Alex said earlier, it's good to test it out and just see what it looks like on a small, a smartphone then.
Right.
When it comes to presenting in person, I have what I call the ABCs of presenting the audience, the breakdown and the content. With the breakdown, you're going to want to find out, where are you presenting? Are you presenting in person on Zoom? Are you presenting from your computer or from a different computer? How big is the room that you're going to be in? What kind of technology will you have? available to you, and that is going to directly impact what you do on your slides. And I think if we only think of our audience and not think about the other things, because I've had it happen to me more than once, where, and even recently for a client, where I created a presentation, I used a particular font, but then when I went to the computer that the presentation will be given on, that font does not exist. And so PowerPoint or Keynote creates something close to it, and it throws everything off on the slide. So
Also, too,
testing it out helps a lot. Yeah, go ahead, Jose.
sorry, I was going to say, you can name a number, but depending on the font itself, that number does not immediately correspond to the actual line height.
Yes.
So basically just look at it. And if you're going to be using, let's say, Impact or Badani is a very tall font, or any number of fonts. That's not the same thing as what you're going to get if you did the same number on a Times New Roman, which is designed for legibility or what is supposedly legibility back in the 19th century. Glenn asked Lisa, so when are you going to show this to us, the magic move? I don't know if you think you have time today. But if you think you have time today, maybe go ahead. If you think that this is better off for like a separate episode of this show, is it okay if I book you again? I'll ask you right now if you want to come back. But you have a bunch of presentations coming up, and maybe is that where you want to show it?
Yeah, I mean, I could show it in a presentation that I have coming up if Glenn would like to join. But I mean, it's really pretty simple. I can explain without I can explain pretty quickly, which is basically you have the exact, how it works is you have the exact same words or images on 2 consecutive slides. The only thing that's different is the size and the position. So instead of being small and in the middle, you have it large and top left or top right. Well, my top left, my top right.
I have a suggestion, Lisa.
Yes.
Why don't you share a screen with Keynote, actually doing that, so they'll understand what how the magic move works.
All right.
I use it all the time, but I'm not sure everybody else does.
All right. Let me make a new.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Start from scratch. That might even be better, and not the actual presentation screen, but the actual construction screen.
Yeah. All right. Let me.
Well, by the way, everybody, this is usually how she makes her money. So I hope you guys appreciate that, you're getting a freebie here.
50 cents for everybody, 50 cents. Come on.
Yeah. And then we get her for an hour. I'll pay for her first hour, and Curtis, you can pay for her second hour. I got to talk to you, girl. 50 cents an hour. Seriously, where'd you get that?
just over 50 cents.
Oh, good. Oh,
like 51 cents an hour.
Oh, you're going nuts there. Oh, yeah.
All right, so here is my brand new slide, and I have this that I've copied over. So it's literally an image of an apple right here and the word apple. And I try when I'm teaching young students, especially because I've done presentations with elementary level students, I use a font that does not have the A with the little hat on top of it. Like with, for example, if we use, I have chalkboard here. If we use Times New Roman, where do I have Georgia? I think I've already passed G, too late.
Oh, by the way, quick tip, type in GEO in your keyboard right now, GEO on your keyboard, and it'll find Georgia for you immediately.
Thank you. I tend to avoid fonts like this one because I know for me, when I was learning Japanese, it was really hard for me to understand those very creative fonts for hiragana or even kanji. Ones that were very simple, that just had the strokes going down and across, were very easy to read. So I try to avoid these kinds of fonts that have the A like that or have the G with that little curly thing at the bottom. I don't use fonts like that. I keep it simple. So the font that everybody hates, everybody dumps on.
Comic Sans.
Comic Sans is actually your best friend.
Totally a misunderstood font. Totally a misunderstood font.
It's your best friend for the classroom because these are the fonts that are easy for students to read, especially if they are beginner English users. These are the fonts that are the easiest for them to read, and then you can graduate to the curly G's and the curly A's with the hats.
Lisa, I don't know if Alex hit her
thumbs
if
up.
that was her thumb button, or if she wanted to ask a question. I think it was her thumb button. But
Yes.
If you want to chime in on the fonts later, Alex, please feel free. But Lisa, go on. Oh, it was the thumb button. Okay.
Yeah.
Go on.
So and it's a thumbs up that she'll chime in, which is excellent because Alex is very good when it comes to. Jose's specialty is with students with.
Her specialty?
Yes. Please remind me.
Her specialty is the kids with basically what we might want to term in generally special needs, kids who are mildly autistic, mildly dyslexic, or full-on diagnosed dyslexic. So basically kids who need a little bit of help for accommodation, as Dr. Jana Moore was saying a few weeks ago, with accommodation in the classroom to get your stuff. They don't need to have you modify things too much, but they need just a little bit of a boost so that then they can use the rest of their brain, which is just as good as the other kids in the class. And one of them is just basically us paying a little bit more attention to our fonts and font sizes and things like what you're talking about right now. Please go ahead.
All right, perfect. So yeah, so I definitely would like for Alex to chime in and let me know. I know my background may not be the most ideal, but I do tend to be partial to this kind of silvery gray. I've been using it pretty much exclusively for the past several years. All right, so this is my first slide. And if you look at the left here, you can see that my apple, the image and the actual word apple, they're both more or less center of the screen. So if I had it like here, it wouldn't be making very good use of the space on my slide. So I always check this view on my left here. And I think it's the same in PowerPoint as well. You can actually see what your slide looks like overall by looking on the left. And so I keep it nice and centered. I have the L in pink because I was teaching my students the L sound, the L sound. So apple, not apple, apple. Everybody say apple, apple. That was the lesson. So for Magic Move, what I do is I create my first slide. And then on the left, where I can see the entire slide itself, the slide view, I right click and I duplicate it. And so now I have two slides with the exact same word and image. On the second slide, what I do is I change the size of my apple, make it bigger. I'm going to move it here. And I'm going to take the word apple, move it here. Let's check if it's more or less centered. Yes, the apple image itself could go over a little bit more, so it's a little closer. Maybe about here. Yep, looks good. On the left here, I like it. And I'm going to change the size of the apple, and I'm going to make this 350. So on Keynote, the size of the font will be about twice the size that you would use on PowerPoint. So if you're doing this in PowerPoint, it'd probably be about 200, maybe 100 and something. I would say 100 and something, maybe 120 font size. Oh, that's a little too big for me. Let's make this. Yes, that's better. So that's it. So we can see apple on the first slide, looks like that. Nice and small, but on the second slide, it's a lot bigger and the position is different. So for Apple, for Keynote, which is for Apple computers only, and for PowerPoint, which is Microsoft, but you can also use PowerPoint on an Apple computer if you pay for it, obviously. The difference between the transitions that are used on both software is where they are placed. On Keynote, for Apple computers only, you use it for what comes next. So the transition that I use on my first slide will affect how it looks going into my second slide. So here I'm going to add the magic move effect, and you're going to see a preview. Oh, I think I have a build. Yeah, I do. Sorry, let's take out this build. So all I have here is my magic move, and this is what it looks like now. Could you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's super slow. I tend to like it a little faster, so I always decrease the speed to about 0.7 and a lot faster with the movement.
By the way, that little side window, the pop-up window, was off a bit on your
screen.
Screen. Yeah, so
Gotcha.
it's okay. I don't know if it was a
No,
really
it wasn't
information.
important. I had a build on the word apple that I didn't realize was there, an animation, so I had to delete it. Not so important, but the magic move is actually a transition that affects how it moves across slides. And to answer Glenn's question, yes, it does work in PowerPoint. If you'd like to, I can actually show you how this would work in PowerPoint.
While she's setting that up, let me give you a bit of a hint that I generally give people about software, learning software, and learning Zoom too. Without sounding condescending, an awful lot of this is actually really well explained inside the help pages of all of your software. The hard thing is actually just learning, well, I don't even know what I don't know. So now that you know the words magic move, or now that you know the word build in or build out, if you go to the help section on a Macintosh, or you go to the resources page resources page on Zoom US, that's where you type something into the search field and a ton of information will come up. And, it doesn't have to remain a mystery if you learn how to use the help section. So even if you don't completely remember what Lisa is saying here, remember that help section or that help menu in your software is a really good friend to you. Sorry, Lisa, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a very good tip. That's a very good tip. And I have it here in PowerPoint. So exact same thing. And here I have Comic Sans. So I don't have the little hat over the A. And we can see here on the left with this view that it's nice and centered, both the image and the word. And I right click, and I duplicate the slide. So I have the same thing consecutively. The transition on PowerPoint is called morph. And the difference with Keynote and PowerPoint, as I was saying before, is where the transition goes. For PowerPoint, the slide that you're going to have the transition moving into is where you start with the transition. So on Keynote, it was the first slide that had the transition. In PowerPoint, it's the second slide that you have put morph on. And I'm going to play it. And share what it will look like. Sorry. Oh, I didn't. I failed.
Yay.
I failed.
Everybody's human. Yay. Hope that doesn't happen during class a lot.
No, sorry. I didn't move the.
I'm giving you a hard time. Sorry.
No, I don't mind that. I forgot to reshape and move it on the second slide. Performance anxiety. All right, I'm going to make this twice the size.
I was going to make, no, I'm not. There are people listening to me and I already am living on the edge, but it was something about making things bigger and you had performance anxiety. So.
No comment. Okay, so here we have our apple. It's different on both slides, right? So we have it looking like this on the first slide. It has to be different on the second slide, otherwise it won't work. And in PowerPoint, I added the morph transition to this slide, and we can preview, see what that looks like. There we go.
Don't get me wrong. I mean, everybody knows quite clearly I'm a huge Mac fanboy, but watching you work, am I correct in the sense that I'm sensing that there's a lot more mouse clicks in PowerPoint to do the same thing than there would be in Keynote, or is that just, my prejudice?
Not for this particular one, no.
Okay, it was my prejudice. All right. Okay.
not for this one. Before PowerPoint added morph, there would have been a lot more because you'd have to actually use animations to get that movement to happen. But now that it has morph, there is less.
Glenn, go ahead.
Hi, Lisa. Thanks for showing that. I have an additional question on there. On your slide showing your students how to change an active voice sentence to passive, you had more than one thing moving around. Was that with a different feature?
Yes, and
Okay.
that's why the slide took as long as it did to create, because I had several things happening there. I actually have a breakdown of what that slide looks like without all of the before I added all of the movement. Let me see if I can find where I put it. Give me just a quick second.
Or was it essentially using more than one magic move?
It
Or
was
just different?
I wasn't even using magic move. I was using an animation called move. And as a result, the slide itself had several.
Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, and I'm not a Keynote user, so I appreciate you doing this with PowerPoint.
No problem. I am going to show the example using Keynote, but I did make this for the very first time using PowerPoint. So this is what the slide originally looked like. I basically had the words Jack and Lisa twice. I had arrows, and I had everything looking like this to begin with. This is what the slide looks like to begin with. And the effect that I used to move the words where I wanted it to is called move. And you can see this red line that's going down like that. There's a red line that shows where Lisa moves to. So when I did this for my students, it was like that. But I moved the Jack and Lisa on top of each other. I layered two text boxes with the same exact words on top of each other, but because they were layered, you couldn't see that they were there. And I just animated everything else in. So that one was quite involved when I made it. And it's also why when it comes to creating different designs, I really think that our level makes a big difference, because for me, this is definitely for someone who is very who's intermediate and looking to try more advanced things with using PowerPoint and Keynote.
Lisa,
Yes.
may I? There was a question in the Facebook comments from Yoshiko.
Mhm.
And I don't know, I don't think she's in the room, but I think, Yoshiko, you have a Macintosh. So just in case that feeling of mine is correct, I want to show, she asked the question, one thing that I'm still struggling with is to actually get the presenter's notes for when I do my presentations. And I wanted to sort of kill two birds with one stone. So if you don't mind, Lisa, I'm going to show my screen, okay? So I'm going to give you guys a portion of screen here. So it'll just take a second for me to adjust this. Okay, now you can't see this as well because it's up on the menu bar of my computer. But Lisa, can you see my menu bar? Can you see the words in my menu bar at the very top of this shared screen?
I can see, no, I can't see, like file, edits, and so on.
Yeah, can you see all of that?
No,
okay, so I'm sorry that you can't see it, but in Keynote, okay, there is the help menu, and I'm going to try to click it now, and I know that you can't see it, but it'll probably come down. Okay.
Yes.
So do you see it coming down in there?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to move this again and show. Now, if you go to the help menu, and let's say there was something that you knew the name for, but you didn't know where it was. There's a whole barrage of menu items. You didn't know where it was. If you go to the help menu, in the search field, you type in something similar to what you're looking for. And you type in, for example, Yoshiko wanted to find the presenter's notes. So just type in, don't even try to put in exactly what it is you're looking for. Type in something that will probably bring it up as a wildcard type search. So not presenters notes with the apostrophe and everything, just presenter. And then you'll see it presented to you right there. See that right there? It says show presenter notes.
And then Apple actually points to exactly
where it is. So
like
if yeah, I love that. And you can actually go to it as it's showing to you. Just remember, show presenter notes, and you can't see it, but I'll tell you where it is. It's oops, sorry. Show presenter notes is under the view menu, about the top third. So I'll go to the view menu right now, top third, show presenter notes. And if you really want to be a master with software, you will force yourself to learn these keyboard shortcuts. And keyboard shortcuts are almost always, if they're available, are to the right of whatever it is on the menu. And you can see there that up arrow, that means shift key. That cloverleaf shape, that's the command key, and then P. So if you hit all three simultaneously, you'll get the presenter notes, and I believe that you turn them on, turn them off with the same keystroke. So what I wanted to show there is not just the presenter notes, but how you use the help menu that I was describing previously.
Yep, sounds good.
I don't see any other questions, raised hands.
Jose, I do.
Go.
There was a question that was in OTJ that I do want to make sure that I address before I
go on.
End.
Please.
And that is presenting on Zoom. And just to quickly say that when it comes to presenting on Zoom, I mean, we've touched on a few tips here and there, but one of the things I think when it comes, Jose, you are the Zoom expert. Oh. And there is this effect on Zoom where you can have your slides as a background. Is that what it's called? Like,
yes, slides as virtual background. Yes.
There you go. Right. And I think when when it comes onto that effect, one of the things I think a lot of us, including myself, regularly forget is when we use it, there is going to be a part of the slide that you are going to be in front of. And as a result, if you have any words or anything that goes into that part of the slide, you are going to be blocking it. And one of the things that I like to do is I like to use, just literally go on Zoom and use slides as a background and take a screenshot of myself in full screen. And then put that image on top of my slide so I know roughly how much of my slide I need to allocate for where my face will be. And I put a rectangle. I just take a shape, I put a rectangle, and I block off that part of my slides. So I make sure that everything goes around that part where I will be, so that I won't be blocking any important information and I'm having to like move this way so that my students can see what I'm pointing at.
May I comment on that?
Sure.
Okay, slides as a virtual background, two things. Okay,
yes. Not
only should you be aware that you will be in front of your slides, duh, but also two, that and it's so unfortunate, but it's just something that is limiting about the whole software trick. The fact that we can do some stuff in Zoom is, I think people should remember, we should be thanking Zoom that they can do it at all. But none of your morphs, none of your blurs, none of your animations will show up in your slides as a virtual background. It will take each slide and show it plain Jane exactly as it is without any of those builds. So if you're depending on the slides as virtual background as a way to like get you in front of people, that's why I ended up with like that large screen version that I do in my my information videos of me off to the side. What people often do, I got to say, I'm uncomfortable.
Cruise control.
Cruise control. Yeah, I know. Okay, I'm not going to say that, but thank you for saying it for me. But also too, where you're positioned on slides as a virtual background is something that could be moved, enlarged, and compressed. So you can actually make your image smaller if you need to. You can move it to the top right, you can move to the top left if you really must use the entire slide. But I'm with Lisa. Keep yourself in one place. Okay. Determine the size that you're going to use and work your slides around it. Now, just one other thing. If you think, oh, gee, I really like slides as a virtual background, but I want to have all of those animations and stuff. Okay. I'm going to be studying OBS. Okay. Adam, I believe it's Open Broadcaster Software. This this springtime. Adam is a real whiz at it, and this is open source software. And if you're willing to try out learning another piece of software, that will get you miles. That is basically your image on top of whatever is happening that you want to point to, and that includes all of your animations and stuff like that. But that's a completely separate episode. Right now we're talking about Lisa's expertise, so she's going to talk like an expert now.
I wanted to show something my last thing for Glenn for PowerPoint. And Glenn had asked about the effect of moving, and I just wanted to show Glenn where he can find it in PowerPoint. So Glenn, in PowerPoint, is called path animation. And here you can see exactly what it looks like. You can make an S, so I can have the apple animate like that. For instance, if I wanted it to. I don't care for that, but this is what I use to get that movement. I think I just did like a draw line, and I can decide where I want to put the apple. So I want the apple to move there. And then I want the word apple, sorry, to move up here. And then I change it so that they animate together and they look something like this. And of course, they're a bit far apart, but you can always change around exactly where you end it instead. And that's how it's done in PowerPoint, just to share.
That's sort of an alternate to the morph function.
That's exactly right. And that's what I used to use, but it takes a lot of energy because you have to be animating everything individually. It's exceedingly time consuming. And that's why I like morph, because morph does it all for you with one click.
Yep, that's where I've got the gray hair. I didn't know about morph.
Can I
Thanks
also
again.
You're welcome.
Can I also point out to everyone that I think we sometimes forget the luxury of that we have when we're in a conference room with our physical audience directly connected to our projectors, which then throw the images onto the screen without having to worry about the internet in between. And when you're doing a lot of animations, when you're moving around a lot of apples and stuff like that, I mean, it's really beautiful to look at. But do consider, again, two things, okay? If your kids are still on limited bandwidth, if they're still on 4G, okay? Who was that? Oh, Alex, sorry, let's see, Alex. Or even if there's slow Wi-Fi in the room and kids are in a hybrid situation with you, the more you start using animations and stuff and the smaller text and stuff, you're going to get jagged motion. And instead of the nice smooth transition from left to right, you're going to get chuk, chuk, chuk. And please be careful of that. Again, test in the room that you want to show. Test not only with your devices that are within your own Wi-Fi environment. Call up your buddy and ask him, from your apartment where you're using cheap Wi-Fi. Not that you need to insult your buddy's Wi-Fi or anything like that, but tell him, could you check this out for me? And you'll find that, after a while, your animations might be slowing down the meeting. Oh, and also too, please remember when you screen share, optimize for video. If you do not optimize for video, you're going to get you're going to get bad audio for one thing, and two, your video is going to have a much slower frame rate. So a whole bunch of Zoom stuff also piles up on this, or your big blue button stuff, or your whatever that you're using, right? Chuk, chuk, chuk. Okay, there you go. Lisa, we have kept you here for almost 2 hours. I don't know about you, but I don't want to take any more advantage of the fact that you do this for a living. But you have a whole slew of tips that I think we could learn from. There's a whole bunch of stuff that, oh man, you're making me hungry, dude. Don't do that. Okay, a whole slew of tips that
I should also say that I'll be working on my book with the Dorothy Zimak with her Ways Goose Press publishing house. So I am working on a book for publication on this topic. So please keep an eye out for it, maybe by the end of this year, early 2023. But I'm getting all of these ideas together, and your feedback has been really helpful. If there's anything that you think would be really good that you'd like to see me put in this as well, definitely reach out to me on Facebook, send me a DM, just let me know. I definitely would appreciate it.
And when Lisa starts doing her, or she schedules firmly the stuff that she's doing, yes, you know, people need to make a living, and then there might be an admission charge, but I will put the information up there, and I think it's worth your while. Unfortunately, we are doing one together in March, and I can't put that one up because that's blatant self-promotion. So I'm hoping there's somebody out there that sees that and says, well, if Jose won't do it, then I will. And you can put that up on OTJ Off Topic, or even actually, no, that would be eligible for OTJ itself, because it is about remote teaching. I want to say thank you to you. I want to say thank you to the audience. Does anyone have anything quick that they wanted to mention, or a quick thank you to Lisa by voice? Anybody out there?
Thank you, Lisa. This has been very informative. I'm looking forward to seeing your book.
Thanks so much, Linda. It's always great to see your face, and I love always seeing when you're
the knitting
working on it. Yes.
And look at all those penguins.
Yeah.
Yes.
Those are cute.
Happy ones.
Okay. Glenn.
Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, Rhea,
Thank you
thank
so
you.
much, Rhea.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much for joining and for staying for so long. It means a whole lot to me, truly.
Glenn.
I missed you.
Okay, wait.
Likewise,
wait,
Rhea.
Glenn. Glenn.
Well, I was just going to remind you that there was something in the chat from Rhea that didn't get answered. She asked, what's your opinion on presentations for the metaverse?
Oh, right.
I did see that, but I'll be very honest, I have not looked into the metaverse.
I don't know what it is beyond Marvel and DC Comics.
No,
this is
that's not.
Facebook.
No, that's not.
Their
No,
Facebook
not that.
is
No,
there.
not that. It's
Virtual
Zuckerberg's
reality.
version of 3D, his 3D reality. And to actually do anything with it, or to even participate in it, you need some kind of 3D software, or 3D hardware, which itself is like a barrier to entry. So probably it's something we're all going to have to deal with eventually. But right now, until it comes out of beta, I don't think it's anything we need to worry about quite yet. But you will be ahead of the curve if you start thinking about it.
Yeah. Thanks for the
Anyway, for the people that are remaining, why don't you turn on your cameras if you're still here, Rhea? I don't know if you're walking around somewhere else, but I want to give Lisa a round of applause. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the audience in the Facebook comments. Thank you to all of you here. Quick wave to the camera. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.